And this week on the Limitless Leadership Lounge, we're going north of the border to have a great conversation with our new friend here, Dr. Craig Dowden. And Coach Jim Johnson knows Craig very well. So, Coach, why don't you take it away and introduce our guest today?
Yeah, I'm really excited to have Craig. We had an opportunity to chat for about an hour a few weeks ago, and we had a great chat, and we're really looking to continue to grow our relationship. So first of all, I would like to give an appropriate intro to Craig. Dr. Craig actually lives in Toronto. He got his PhD from Carleton in psychology. He has written a book called Do Good to Lead Well, and then he's releasing in just a few days after this podcast will be released his new book called Time to Lead, that he actually collaborated with Alan Mulally. That was actually his last job was the CEO of Ford. So we're really excited to look at that book, and we're actually going to ask some questions about that book as well. Dr. Craig is also a regular contributor to Forbes, Financial Post, and Huffington Post, as well as others. He is also a keynote speaker and a executive coach. So, Dr. Craig, really excited to have you on the program. Welcome.
Well, thanks so much, Coach. And it's absolutely awesome to be here, and I've enjoyed our conversations. And as you say, getting to know each other and align around principles of positive leadership. So really looking forward to this conversation this morning with all of you.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump right in with the first question. And I'm just curious, with your new book, what was the spark that you wanted to read or write this new book?
Yeah, thank you. It's an interesting journey, because Do Good to Lead Well, I kind of describe it as it's really around leading others. So talked about the 6 pillars of positive leadership that's based on the evidence that's been accumulated over decades of research. And as during the pandemic is really when I got inspired at the beginning of the pandemic. One of the themes that really resonated with me in the coaching work and speaking work that I was doing is around great leadership starts with great self-leadership. And so what I was inspired to do was talk about, once again, evidence-based practices that relate to how can we effectively lead ourselves. So as an example, mastering our mindset, or mastering our emotions, mastering our resiliency, mastering difficult conversations. And so that was a big impetus behind it. And then I had the amazing good fortune of meeting Alan Mulally, who you mentioned, and we just immediately connected around positive leadership, and most importantly, connecting who you need to be as a leader, who you are, as well as what you do. And so that was a big part behind it as well. And so to be able to bring his extraordinary expertise, experience, insight in CEO masterclasses in the book was awesome. And I learned so much through the process, so which is a key driver for me.
Well, Craig, I had to jump in before my other colleagues jump in, because I'm fascinated. I read and listened to some of Alan Mulally's interviews over. I'm just curious, could you, I'm sure, as you said, you learned a lot, but could you share one thing that really jumped out that you learned from Alan Mulally about leadership?
Wow. Okay, that's amazing. Yeah, that's right. How long do we have? What's the limit, John, on the size?
We're not going to put a limit on this question.
There are so many. I think one of the things that I love, I might cheat and provide a couple. Number one, which really stuck with me, is that never a joke at someone else's expense. So we can have vigorous conversation, we can have vigorous debate, we can disagree, yet you do not attack the sacredness of an individual. So it's not personal. We can have differences of opinion. And as he shared with me during one of our many conversations, people tend to go along to get along, yet the damage that is caused when we make personal attacks is really challenging to overcome, if not impossible, and has long-lasting effects. And there's so much research that supports that. So that's number one. The second one is that, and I love this as well, you can't manage a secret. And so what he had was his business plan review, which was a weekly review where every single one of us, so if we were on a team, we would come together with all the different projects and activities that we were working on together and basically provide an update from a color code. Green meaning awesome, all systems go. Yellow, there may be some challenges, but I think I've got this. And then red, which is, whoa, I'm in trouble. And so what he encouraged and really cemented into the culture in both Boeing commercial airplanes as well as Ford was around, well, everyone's going to have reds. So he strongly encouraged people to bring the challenges to the table. And so one of the best stories, I love this story that he shared with me, is that so early on, people were really skeptical and fearful of, because, well, if I say red on this project, I'm in real trouble. And so he shared this great example where the first several meetings, it was all green. And they were really not performing well financially. Like they were in a lot of trouble. And then so eventually one of the senior executives decided, you know what, I'm going to put a red on my chart. And Alan had said beforehand, he said, seriously, we're losing money. If we're all green when we're losing money, what's it going to look like when we're really in trouble, right? And so this person put the red in their chart, and then everyone, I remember he shared with, everyone went silent, and people thought, oh, the big iron doors are going to open and this person is going to be ushered out. And then what he did, which I think is so brilliant and so insightful and instructive for all of us, he applauded. He actually applauded in front of everyone and said, this is an example of great leadership. This is the visibility, the transparency we need in order to deal with our challenges. How do we support this person? Like, wow, what a masterclass, right? And then what he also did, which was remarkable, and I know I'm taking a little bit of extra on this, but I think it's so powerful. Then what he did is move this executive closer and closer to him during the upcoming meetings to show that it's not only valued in the moment, this gets more and more of my attention. And so very, very powerful.
Wow.
This is such an important thing that you mentioned, and it's about feedback. You often talk about feedback, and Adam Grant, probably he wrote the foreword for your first book. And I love his books on Think Again and his podcast and everything. And he talked about this, like accepting feedback, not to judge. And sometimes we are a preacher, we are a judge, and that can create that conflict and not letting us move forward. So my question to you, how do you, like, when we expect our leaders to be decisive, like, okay, and if you're not decisive, then you're weak. So how do you balance, like when do you know that when I should take the feedback, when that is that balancing act? How do we do that?
Absolutely. Well, and I think what's awesome, and I love Adam as well, and just it's such a huge fan of him and his work and his philosophy and how he approaches things and challenges us to think again. And on the feedback front, what's really interesting to me as well, Dr. Kareem, is that there's so many books, articles, research around, well, how do you deliver feedback? And very little on how do you receive it well.
True.
And then what's interesting is how do we expect other people to take our feedback if we don't demonstrate any interest in receiving theirs? And I think what's really powerful, and I love how you talk about the balance, because I think that's such an important point that you're making. And I had the profound privilege of speaking with Doug Stone. So he's out of Harvard Negotiation Project. He wrote the amazing book, Difficult Conversations, also wrote a fantastic book called Thanks for the Feedback. And when we were speaking, he shared with me something which, again, I think is so instructive and insightful for all of us. When we receive feedback, rather than looking for what's wrong with it and then to dismiss all of it, the question we should ask ourselves is, what's right about it? What's right about this feedback? And I love your notion of balance, because that's a great way, because we generally over-index, right, on the negative to try to get rid of it or say, oh, well, they don't know, John doesn't know what I'm talking about. So now to create that balance is incredibly powerful. And here's another piece that I feel is really key and something that I speak with my executives around in my coaching practice and aspiring executives as well. And I know this is a great audience for those individuals. And really it's around, okay, the more the feedback hurts, right, where you go, oh, Now and this is this really takes a lot of practice and a lot of masterful skill here, is then go, that's probably the feedback we all want to listen to the most, because what it's doing is challenging our identity, challenging things that who we think we are. And there's likely really powerful insight in that, in terms of how we can maximize having a positive impact on others. And that's fundamentally what we want to do. And sometimes when we get hijacked in that feedback conversation and we react defensively, not only do we miss an opportunity to learn, we also then minimize the chance that someone's going to come back to us later and say, hey, coach, here's something else I want to share with you, because the first time through did not go well. I don't need to see that movie again. So love that question.
And humility, I think with the feedback, you have to have that humility to accept feedback. If we are like overconfident and think that we are always right. So humility, I think you also in one of your talked about humility, how important it is for a leader.
Well, you nailed it, right? Like, how can we possibly accept feedback if we're not humble, if we don't have a humble mindset? And again, if you look at it, and I love that you mentioned Adam's book, Think Again, you look at the top books that are out there by the top thought leaders in the world. I mean, Adam Grant is one of the universally respected and well-known thought leaders. You've got Ozan Verrill's book, Think Like a Rocket Scientist. You have Ed Hess out of Dowden, Humility is the New Smart. All of these books are around, and the insights of top thought leaders is around. We need to continually question our assumptions, not get enamored with our own thinking, our own perspectives, our own beliefs. And so being open to those alternate perspectives. And here's the other thing, just because we listen to feedback without judgment doesn't mean I have to agree with it or even do anything about it. That's what I love. Just you let it wash over you, if you will, and then we have the choice about what we want to do with it. And here's the best part. Even if I choose to disagree with it and say, you know what, I don't feel like this is accurate. Now I know if I continue to act the way that I am, what impact it's going to have on the other person. Because one of the things, and I'm sure each of you find this too, right, is that sometimes like, well, why does so-and-so keep doing this? Or why do they get upset? Now this is unlocking invaluable information for us. So now we know, if I'm going to keep acting this way, or I'm going to keep saying this word or showing up in this way, this is going to be the result. And then I'm making a choice that, okay, I'm prepared to accept the consequences. Exactly. And now as a leader, or as an aspiring leader, it's so valuable, because now I can directly impact how I show up and how other people experience me.
Perfect.
We're talking with Dr. Craig Dowden, and Doctor, I think a great question for you coming up, since Time to Lead is releasing in just a few days here, and we have that link down in the show notes for you to get your hands on one of those copies, and we're looking forward to that releasing in just a few days. You said September 13th, right?
That's it. Yeah, September 13th. It's going to be here around the corner.
Looking forward to it. Crazy that it's already September, isn't it? Well, we're looking forward to that. Time to Lead again coming up. But my question for you in this conversation about feedback is, after Do Good to Lead Well and some of the other work that you've done, what's some of the feedback that you received that maybe challenged you a little bit, and how did you respond to that feedback? And even if it was difficult at first, ultimately better yourself and make your work even better as we come closer to the release of Time to Lead here?
Yeah, well, one of the things, and a great question, and here's one of the really fascinating nuggets that's come out of it. And I know, so as you said at the beginning, one of the reasons I pursued my postgraduate degree was to have access to the evidence. And so I am, I'm very much a fan of research, and then translating that into practice. And one of the pieces that I was challenged on, and people say, well, what's the point? Well, isn't this positive psychology all fluff? And then one of the things that I naturally, and all of us can naturally do, is react in kind of like, well, look, there's more evidence. Look at all of this research. And I love studies. Like, I will just pepper more and more and more research. And what's really interesting is that evidence doesn't shift perspectives. It's really when you connect. And so we often will try to stack. Look at why I'm right, right? And it was so valuable for me to be able to sit back and then say, okay, well, tell me more. What is your concern around this? And what about that? So as a great example, and I'm thrilled you asked this question because it really informed this book that's going to be out in a few days. Because what people would say is, oh, okay, yeah, that all sounds good. And, there's research on this in these companies, but they're small scale, right? Like they don't, or they're in a real niche. And so what I was motivated by was to say, okay, how awesome would it be to be able to get insight in terms of how these qualities apply in the largest multinational companies? And then I had the amazing good fortune of meeting Alan, who, as we talked, these were integral to his working together management system. And so that was a big thing for me because I said, okay, great. Now, not only can I talk about the science and practice of these qualities through the collaboration with Alan and Sarah MacArthur, well, now what we can do is showcase how these qualities were integral to the turnarounds of Boeing commercial airplanes and Ford Motor Company. So if they can use these qualities there, I don't know too many organizations that are bigger or better well known than these two. So it was just such an amazing fortuitous turn of events. And I love your question because that was a key driver for me, John, in terms of, hey, how do I address that? Because I understand it. I understand where people are coming from.
Yeah. Well, good things come to those who work hard too. And obviously it's hard. It has to be hard when you receive feedback. You've worked so hard on this, and all of a sudden, well, the companies aren't big enough. How do you know? You get that pushback. It's got to be so hard not to just push back and say, well, look at how hard I've worked, but then you actually went deeper. What do you recommend for maybe young and emerging leaders who don't have that experience, but receive that sort of feedback and it hurts and it's hard to hear? How do you dig even deeper within yourself and decide, you know what, I'm going to go the extra mile and prove this?
Yeah, well, it's an awesome question, and it prompted, so I really appreciate it because it prompts some memories with me. So in one of the first articles I ever wrote in the Financial Post in Canada, so it's national publication, I was so excited, and I wrote about positive psychology and positive leadership, and it went live, and I went into the comment section, and the first person said, well, what do you expect? Someone kind of shilling positive psychology, it's total bunk, right? Like, of course he is. He's trying to make a living. And I was like, wow, that hurts, And I think what's really interesting, it's back to how we receive feedback. Okay. Then I was curious about, all right, so where are they coming from? And then I started to ask questions around, okay, so what is creating that impact on me? What's triggering my own emotional reaction to it? What questions might I ask this person around it? How can I learn from this in terms of their own hesitation or their own skepticism? And I think as challenging as it is, it's essential. And I love the point earlier about humility, is saying, so how can I learn from each of these things? And a really powerful lesson is, and I think it's so important for emerging leaders, which is, well, not everyone's also going to connect with us, resonate with our message and who we are. And that's absolutely okay. And it doesn't make them wrong and us right either. What it does is enable us to find our community. So as an example, this beautiful example this morning, why I'm so excited. We're all here, we're excited about positive leadership. So we won't probably be on another podcast or event where just like, hey, we got to drive everyone and be disrespectful and on and on and on. Mm-hmm. So now what's really great is to say, okay, well, now I'm inspired by how do I shift my focus? And hey, if this isn't the community for me, how do I find the right fit? Where am I going to be in a community where my talents are appreciated, where my insights are valued, and I can have the biggest possible positive impact that I want?
Sure. Hey, Dr. Craig, with your first book, Do Good to Lead Well, and that was more from my understanding of working on how to lead others. And your second book is a little bit more focused on time to lead, on leading yourself. And it's something we talked a lot about amongst the three of us, and certainly we brought up. So Mike, I'm curious, with all your research, what have you found of some habits that effective leaders consistently do, as opposed to maybe people that aren't so effective at leading themselves?
Amazing question. And here's one that's really, to me, so a couple of things, and it's why, you know, have a chapter on mastering our emotions. I think leaders who master their emotions and are aware of their emotions, and here's a really critical thing, and I love the balance question again. I don't want to go back to that, right? Which is, emotions are data points. So what they are is they give us information, and here's what's really inside information, not insider information, inside information about us and how we function. And so the best leaders that I work with and coach, rather than judge an emotion, they're curious about it. They look at it in a balanced way. What is this trying to tell me right now? And it doesn't matter, again, if I should or shouldn't feel, like, put that to the side, right? Which is, what is this telling me right now? And then what's great is we can use that insight for future conversations or future situations that we face, right? And so I call it almost like an emotional Sherlock Holmes around our emotional lives. And that's critical because it allows us to master our own internal emotional state, and our moods are infectious. As leaders, as aspiring leaders, people pick up on our emotions. So if I'm nervous, if I'm anxious, if I'm angry, well, that's going to directly impact the people around me. And so looking to drive a positive presence, being aware of our emotions and understanding ourselves better, that is an absolute masterclass in world-class leadership. And then the other piece, I think, which is really powerful, which is around authentic leadership. And you hear that all over the place these days, you know, in terms of the importance of being authentic. And here's what I find is incredibly important, which is just let people know. Sometimes people think, oh, well, to be an authentic leader, I need to almost come up with some persona and project it out there where I think other people want me to be a particular way. Well, no, that's inauthentic. The other pieces as well, which is the flip side, which is also not effective, which is, well, you know what, coach, that's just who I am. You deal with it. That's also not ineffective. Here's what's great though, and I've coached leaders who are naturally, they have a more resting unhappy face, if you will, or they're stern, or, you know, they just jump right into business right away. There's no social niceties. And that can be, you know, for some challenging to change within themselves. And here's the magical secret, right? Let people know. Just declare who you are. That's authentic leadership. So then say, hey, everyone, you know what? I have a tendency, especially when things are moving really quickly, to jump right into business. Let me know. Like, you know, just go, hey, Craig, time out. Can we have a few minutes to connect, to have a conversation about what's going on? Or if I look really intense in a meeting and you feel like I'm just brewing, right, upset underneath, raise your hand, call it out, because that's not my intention. And that's what's beautiful about authentic leadership. That's being authentic. It's letting people know we all have our own little pieces, right? Our own challenges, our own gaps, our own tendencies. By letting people know what's going on and then inviting them to let us know when we're having an opposite impact, what a great way to build incredibly meaningful and positive relationships. And the extra bonus is they'll be inclined to share little things that they have, right, with you in return.
And
Dr. Craig, I got to say one thing, and I know you have a question, but you struck a chord, and I'm thinking to myself, geez, I wish I'd have met you about 15 or 20 years ago, because you know, my career, I ended up having quite a bit of success, but I had a big stumbling block. We kept losing in our postseason tournament, and I couldn't understand why. And what I figured out, the epiphany was that I realized, because one of my leadership keys is leading by example. And I was a good leader during the season and in the off season, but in the postseason, because I wanted to win that championship so bad, I was a different person. And the negative emotions that came from me, where do you think it did? It affected my team immensely. And my epiphany, ironically, was Jason's senior year, when he had the magical game. And then we ended up winning our first championship. And I share that with leaders, the power of your emotions and how it affects either positively or negatively. Because after never getting into a finals, we made 8 finals in our last 11 years. So really having that epiphany. So I apologize that I didn't know you about 25 years ago, because you could have solved that issue much sooner. So,
Coach would be in the Hall of Fame of basketball. You'd have 25 rings on your fingers, right?
Well, and you raise such an amazing point, because, you know, and again, it enables me to talk about the research, right? There's tremendous research that shows our emotions are contagious. And then whose emotions are the most contagious in a team? It's the leader, the coach. And then when we're in a negative emotional environment, guess what happens? We're more fearful. We don't capitalize on opportunities. We play it safe. We don't take risks. All the things that lead to being successful on the court or off, in a professional environment or a personal environment. And so being aware of that, and again, to the aspiring emerging leaders, is that, you know, a question I'll ask clients that I work with is that, are you in an emotional state that you want other people to catch right now? So be aware of that.
And I agree so much with you, because I've seen this reflect in our life, being an organizational leader of running a nonprofit. I've seen that being authentic, when I'm genuine, it is so everybody can feel that tone that I'm genuine. And that's why I was so fortunate enough to have so many people supporting my cause, helping me, because whenever I know that I don't know something, I'm open to it. When I need support or help, I'm open to it. And I genuinely show who I am. So that really helped me to move forward with my mission. And along that line, because we are talking about the mindset, and I'm a big fan of Carol Dweck's mindset and Daniel Goleman's EQ. So I love all those researchers, and I know you loved it too. You love it too. So I have seen so many around me who has the potential, but they are fear of failure. And also they have excuses of like, it has to be perfect. So sometimes fear of failure and perfection seems to stop them from reaching out their potential. There is this Martin Seligman's research on learned helplessness. I'm fascinated with that. So in what ways do you think, like if somebody comes to you and they cannot move forward because of this perfectionist attitude or fear of failure, what are your advice to those persons?
Yeah, it's such an amazing question. You're bang on in terms of my love for all of the research around mindset, because it's so powerful, not just in terms of a concept or an idea, in practical application. And I love the acronym. I'll share a couple of acronyms, right, that are so powerful for failure. So FAIL stands for first attempt in learning. And I share that constantly. And then another one is from action I learn. So these are two really powerful pieces of insight around failure, because guess what? When we try something for the first time, are we going to knock it out of the park? Of course not. Like, it's going to be a struggle. And so this is the brilliant piece of it. And what do we need to do to achieve our potential? We need to keep learning. We need to keep growing. And boy, is that more important now with the speed and pace of change than ever before. And we talk about flexibility and adaptability. So now what's critical in our failures, that's just part of the human condition. I've probably messed up several times already during our conversation, and you learn from it. And that's what's really powerful, right? And so I think what's really key is start to ask yourself, all right, what can I learn from this situation? And again, I'm so happy you used the word balance and talked about that earlier, because what's the magic here? If I encounter a setback, there are a couple of things that I can ask myself, right? What didn't go well, which we tend to naturally gravitate towards. Here's the other piece, another equally powerful question that we miss. What went right? Right? And so this is what's awesome, because we can continue to replicate, and I'm sure coach will, right? You go out, you run plays, you're on the, all right, that's been working, that's good. Let's not throw it all out, because that part of the play or that back screen or whatever, that was effective. And now with the things that are suboptimal, what changes can we make? What can we learn? What can we do differently? who can we seek out? Who can help us? Here's the other really powerful thing, right? And I know, and I love your passion around for aspiring emerging leaders. Great thing to do. Find mentors, find people who have already done something. And rather than look at them and say, oh, well, I could never do that, or, oh, of course they're successful, then you look and say, hey, what can I learn from them? Maybe I can reach out and ask them, how did you do that? What were some of the lessons that you learned, so I don't have to go and make some of the missteps that you did? So I think when we reframe our mindset around failure and look at it as a growth opportunity and see it as naturally being human and as a natural consequence, it is a consequence of us pursuing the limits of our potential. If we want to be the most that we can be, then of course we're going to be doing new things. And what that means is we're going to have to learn it and not be perfect out of the gate. Right. So I think all of those elements are so powerful for us to remind ourselves of and to continue moving forward.
Yeah, yes. And I've seen there are so many, they're saying, but we are not you. You're always with the optimist. You're a big optimist. You're always seeing things in a positive way, but we are not you. And I try to but you can try to shift and move towards something, because without moving forward, we actually cannot realize what we are able to do, and we cannot be happy.
And I love that point because, and again, I refer people to research, and you talked about Seligman's work around optimism. And one of my favorite studies was where they dropped a $5 bill in front of a coffee shop, and then they had participants showing up to fill out a questionnaire, which ironically enough was whether they were optimistic or pessimistic.
Right. And
then what happened was, what the optimists were significantly more likely to pick up the $5 bill. And so, and I'm careful to say, look, I'm not guaranteeing that the next time you go to Starbucks, there's going to be $5 laying around for you. However, what it shows is that when we're optimistic, we see the world as full of opportunity rather than threat.
Right.
What it does is maximize the chances that we're going to be able to capitalize on things that are right in front of us. And going back to failure, and then I guess it's companion emotion of fear. Well, when we're in a fearful mindset, we shut down, we want to protect, we want to stay close to home. So we're not in exploration mode, we're not in curiosity mode, we're going to limit the chances to get the information that we need to be at our best. True. So all of those things are vital to remind ourselves around, well, and our mindset is within our control. Like I can choose to see this as the scariest conversation I've ever had in my life, or I can see it as this is going to be so much fun, and I'm excited to be able to have a conversation with like-minded people around how can we make the world a better place.
Yeah, we are pretty frightening, aren't we? I
know. I didn't want to go there, and although now that you open that door,
yeah, especially Coach, though. We'll blame it all on
That's
Coach.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I got two questions for you, Craig. My final couple questions. First, you're really striking a chord here with me, and because I talk with a lot of young and emerging leaders, and in school as well at the great Syracuse University, which we touched on before. I am an alum of that, and I talk with a lot of young and emerging leaders there in my time taking classes with them. And I think one of the things they really have a stumbling block around is stepping outside of comfort zone. And you talk about fear, and you talk about how it keeps us inside. And a lot of us feel successful with what we're doing. What we're doing feels successful to us. So we keep doing what we're doing, but we never actually grow because we don't step outside of our comfort zone. But if we don't do that, then we don't get our first attempt in learning, or our from action I learn, right? Those fail acronyms. So how important is it? And what do you suggest for someone who just has a hard time stepping outside of their comfort zone because they feel comfortable in it and they feel like that is their success?
Well, and love the question, and it's so important, and I'll answer it in a couple of ways. I mean, few anecdotal examples. Think of companies that have just gotten enamored with their own success and have failed to adapt. I'm sure we could ask Coach and flip it around and say, what kind of, from basketball, what teams have just fallen in love with their roster, their play scheme, and then they fall victim, right? And so anecdotally, there's countless examples of when we don't adapt to the environment, well, we're gonna get into a losing streak. And companies, massive global, right? Jim Collins' amazing book, Too Big to Fail, is around, well, there were companies that thought they were too big and they were in trouble. And so for people who struggle with that, a couple of really great things and some tools that executives that I work with will use. Number one is figure out your strengths. Do an assessment. There's a great strengths-based assessment online. It's free. It's in the Values in Action. It's the VIA Institute. Amazing. It's been administered to over 12 million, maybe 15 million people right now. You go online for a free, probably 10-15-minute assessment. It'll give you an output of your core strengths, your signature strengths. And sometimes we don't even know how best to show up or stretch outside of our comfort zone because we're, okay, how can I maximize my chances for success? Going back to perfectionism. So there's an amazing body of research around strengths that, well, the more we're aligned with our strengths, the more successful we are, the more motivated we are, the more innovative we are, on and on and on. Another great question to ask ourselves is to say, oh, because here's the other challenge. We look at it as, okay, well, I'm going to step outside of my comfort zone. So I'm afraid of swimming. So I'm just going to jump into the deep end without a life jacket on. A critical question we can ask ourselves is, what is the smallest step I can take outside of my comfort zone where it will stretch me, yet I can, and now we're doing a bit of a trial balloon. We're doing a pilot test. And what's really awesome is, and I find this time and time again, is that it goes way better than we think. And now we're inspired, whoa, now I can do more. So rather than, again, being, well, I want to be a marathon runner. So I'm just, I'm going to run the next marathon in my town or my city. Whoa. I'll never be able to do that. What's one thing? Well, I can start walking around the block for a month straight, right? I can start to jog. I can start to get on an exercise bike. So now what we're doing is looking, what's the smallest step that you can take that you will feel is outside of your comfort zone? And now you have data as opposed to your fear. And it gives me a chance. I've thrown out acronyms like crazy here this morning. A great acronym for fear is false evidence appearing real. I love that one. Exactly, because in our minds, right, what's happening here is that we assume a reality that we haven't even tested yet. So it feels like it's actually happened. So now whenever someone I'm working with is fearful, I'll say, okay, what evidence do you have to support that? And now as we start to unpack it, and this can apply in any circumstance, well, I'll never be able to do that. What makes you say that? Have you tried it yet? No. Have you even tried something close to that? No. Okay, well, what's the smallest step you can take to see if that'll work? Awesome. And now it empowers us as opposed to frightens us around moving ahead.
Yeah, my final question for you, Craig, kind of surrounding that fear aspect and what limits a lot of us is this thought that this positive intelligence, positive leadership isn't possible for us because, well, I'm a glass half empty person, or I'm a pessimist. I don't see the world like Renuma was saying earlier. I don't see the world like you do. It's not all roses and daisies. Is it possible to learn positive psychology and positive leadership?
Well, and that's what's so awesome. And Renuma talked about, all the different amazing pioneers in the mindset research. We can learn these things. We can learn all of these skills. All of these qualities are within our control. And the critical part is just like any skill. Doing a layup. I'm a huge basketball fan, so it's repetition. It's getting in there. It's getting out there and doing the work. So we can start to look for. So rather than looking for, so as an example, if I'm a pessimist. And again, showing up to our conversation this morning, I mean, oh, it's going to be the worst. Why am I doing this? Like, this is going to be a waste of time. Great questions you can start to ask yourself to shift your mindset and say, what are 3 things that I thought were fantastic about this upcoming meeting? And now and then try that on, see how that feels. And then guess what? What happens is, oh, there's more there were things that I appreciate that I didn't recognize before. So there are ways in which that all of us can shift that if we pay attention to it and do the practices, put it in, just like difficult conversations. We don't magically show up and start having a master class in difficult conversations. It takes time. It takes attention and practice. So that would be my try it on. Walk into a meeting and say, what can I learn today? Versus this is going to be the worst. See how that feels for the people I work with. It is quite transformational.
Yeah, and it's I can vouch for it because I'm an example of that, because 8 years ago I went through several life challenges within 4 months, and then I started to delve into this world of experts. And because I'm also a science-based researcher, when I'm getting those data and small habit, like I was taking small steps towards what I want to do. And now at this stage of my life, I can say that I have never been happier. So I feel that it is possible. And that's why I'm so strong about making others feel that way. Like if I can feel this way, just following these mindset and EQ and emotional, controlling emotion and all those things, everybody could do that and become better than what they were before.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing your personal story. And what's awesome is try it out. Like, what do you have? And that's what's cool too, right? Try it out. What do we have to lose? If I think the glass is half full, well, it's still going to be, or half empty. It's still going to be half empty if I go out and try this and it doesn't have a positive impact. So I'm still going to go back to it. And hey, what might actually happen? I see it as half full now. Awesome. Right. So it's challenging ourselves and going back to, well, how can we be our best selves? How can we inspire the best of others? And Renuma talked about, right, Adam Grant and all of Think Again and the Martin Self. It's shifting our mindset. We must be, for the challenges of today and tomorrow, agility, flexibility, adaptability. We have to shift to our realities.
Craig, my last question for you, because you kind of just started to go into that a little bit, is, for people that are, looking to get into leadership, and from what you're seeing, what's the future of effective leadership look like?
Yeah, and thank you for that question. I think, and you're absolutely right. That agility, that adaptability, those pieces, flexibility, very critical, and being open to, and I love the point earlier around being open and accepting of information and feedback and that humility piece. What I would add to it as well is that we're moving into an era, and certainly as we've gone through the pandemic, the humanistic side of leadership is going to be everything. As technological advancements, AI, all of that stuff. Like, where do we as human beings have a competitive advantage? Doing things that computers cannot, or are at the present time. And here's the other thing. If people have a better experience dealing with a computer than they do us, that's a challenge. So, and again, this is, you look at the Great Resignation, you look at quiet quitting, which is all coming out, right? At this moment in time, our desire, and I would even say our need to connect with people, is higher than ever before. So those human qualities, like empathy, as an example, right? And truly connecting with, understanding, caring about the people around us, this is mission critical. Because we can have the best product service possible. I can be the smartest person in the room, going back to Alan, right? But if I'm making personal attacks, you raise your hand with a question and I cut you down, well, what's the chances that people are going to get behind my idea, no matter how insightful it is? So those quote unquote softer skills are essential. And in a world where we're moving into having less conversations like this and doing it more through text and email, I would say for leaders of the future, and now, have as many conversations as you can with as many different people as possible, so you can learn to relate, connect, inspire, and engage as many people as possible. Because that's what most people aren't doing. To be successful in life, we have to do the things that others aren't or aren't prepared to do. Get out and have more conversations. And Side benefit, they're a boatload of fun like this morning.
Mhm.
And in Wall
Yes.
Street Journal, Arthur Brooks, another expert in positive psychology and also an economist, he talked about about happiness. And this is what he talked about relationship. And and in his data, science-based research, he found out the most loneliest people in this earth are the middle-aged men, not women, because they often lack close connection and relationships, which women usually have. But men, to them, like 60 years old men will say that my closest friend is my wife, but they don't have any other close friends. And he was telling, like, go out there and make friends, be with people.
You're absolutely right. And again, we can get caught up in pursuing all kinds of different pieces. And then fundamentally, and this is, I mean, this has been demonstrated time and time again. I remember there was a great study done by Ed Diener several years ago where they looked at the association between happiness and our physical health and longevity. And there's countless studies that show if we're not, happiness is equally, if not more powerful than whether we smoke, our exercise, our weight, all those kinds of things. It's an incredibly powerful predictor of our overall quality of life. And
Right.
what is the foundation of a happy life? It's the people in our communities. It's the people, the depth of the relationship. So I love, Renuma, that you're talking about that and bringing that up, especially as we close our time, right? Which is
Mm,
that these relationships are invaluable. They support us with ideas. They provide us with a community of like-minded people. They are a source of support when we're under stress, which
right.
again, in today's world, we're really at the top end of the stress scale, right? So there are countless benefits. And unfortunately, what we can do, especially when we're feeling down, is withdraw from people and close off our social networks. And what's really critical is during those times is to lean in more powerfully within it and build deeper connections so that we can be as successful and happy as we can.
Perfect.
He's Dr. Craig Dowden on the Limitless Leadership Lounge. And Craig, finally, time to lead. It's coming in just a few days here. How do we get our hands on one of those copies? And then what are we looking forward to after that book comes out?
Thank you. You can get it on Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, Amazon, any online retailer, and also Simon and Schuster and Barnes and Noble stores across the U.S. and chapters here in Canada as well. And what's next is going to be a lot of fun moving forward, talking about the book and having the opportunity to engage in these meaningful conversations. And then thinking about what the next, and then what's funny is people say, well, what's your next book going to be about? And I'm like, you get your first one out, the one out first, and then next. But I'm really looking forward to supporting the book and engaging with people. And if anyone on your podcast wants to connect, I'm available on LinkedIn and happy to share any of the resources that I provided today. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. And look down in those show notes there for the links, how to get in touch with Craig and learn more about his work. And it's also not a bad idea to go back and take a look at Do Good to Lead Well as well. So a couple of great books that we're looking forward to. The second one now coming up from Dr. Dowden. So thanks so much for joining us, Craig. And thank you for listening to the Limitless Leadership Lounge. If you would just leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Audible, wherever you're listening today, or subscribe to our new YouTube channel. We'd love it. It helps us to grow and it helps us to reach more young and emerging leaders like yourself. Thank you, Craig, for joining us. And thank you for having on the Limitless Leadership Lounge today. We'll catch you next week.